أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Yeah. Right. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد بارك وسلم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, that we will be here in our monthly lecture for this month in December, inshallah. And today we wanted to speak a little bit about our situation and our environment. You know, Islam is such that it is always connected to whatever we are doing, right? Now, according to the Gregorian calendar, we are in the end of the year and our population is majority over 50% are Christians. So, you know, when you look at this here and you look at Trinidad and Tobago, it is talking about Christmas and that kind of thing. And what goes with that festivities and season is a lot of stuff dealing with alcohol, right? So we wanted to really look at those impacts, right? And other things that goes with this. So our lecture, inshallah, we will be speaking about Jannah and how we protect our Jannah. So inshallah, we could see some of the pics there. You see like, you might have some perfume, some marijuana, Angostura bitters, fruit cake, black cake, sanitizers, all those things there, right? Whether they fall under alcohol or drugs, something, and how they affect what it is in terms of Islam. How do we deal with those things? So inshallah, one of the reasons that I dealt with this is with respect to this here. There was a little study here in primary schools in Trinidad and Tobago, right? And they took 40 primary schools, right? And in those 40 primary schools, there were roughly 1,600 pupils that they did a survey for. Now look at the thing here, right? These students that they checked, primary schools, right? They took children from ages 8 years and up, 8, 9, 10, how young primary school children are. And if you look at this little chart here, what we've seen in green here is 30% of those children. That's roughly 480 children who are like 8 years or older had already consumed alcohol, right? This particular survey was dealing with alcohol and what it is. So I'm going to show you why we need to have a little chit chat about this, right? That 30% of these students, and this is only in 40 schools, right? So in these 40 schools, if we divide, there were roughly about 12 children in each primary school from 8 years up had already tasted or drank alcohol, which means to say that 70% or so did not, right? Now that's simple enough to see. But then if we go a little further, what also came up in this survey was the fact that in this yellow here, you will see 10%. 10% of these children, which is 160 pupils, had already gotten drunk, completely drunk. And we're talking about primary school children. I'm not talking about older children. I'm not talking about children who are teenagers or young adults or anything. Primary school children we're talking about in these, and only, this is a sample. This is only 40 primary schools. Trinidad have a couple, 170 or so, right? And look at the kind of situation. So you know that sometimes Muslims people, you know, alcohol is there and it doesn't affect us, but it does. Because our children going to primary school, our nephews, our nieces, our neighbors, something, and that is what they're bouncing up. There's meeting 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds who have already experienced alcohol, and some of them have gone and completely gone and experienced being totally drunk and hangover and everything. That is the kind of thing that's happening in the primary school, right? So to say that as a Muslim that we not recognizing was in our environment, right, that's we lack in there. So that's why we're going to take a look at this. Now, there's a little survey here by the National Alcohol Survey of Households in Trinidad and Tobago, NASHT, right? And this report was in 2018. So, you know, 19 was COVID was a bad year. So we're looking at the report from the year before. And in this one here, right, let's take a little, they took a survey throughout the Caribbean, right? And if you look at all these islands in the Caribbean, Cuba, Haiti, coming down, Antigua, straight down the road, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and so on. Which country you think had the highest amount or highest percentage of males drinking alcohol out of all those countries? Guyana. No, Imam said Guyana. What do you think? Alice? Right. So in terms of percentage, Trinidad had the most males who consume alcohol on a regular basis. Now, before we finish, we're still on the same chart. What about females? Which country you feel had the most females who drinking alcohol? You still say Trinidad? Well, right, you're correct. So, right? So really and truly, when they did this survey by Nash here, right? They found that half of the males and half of the females are normal consumers of alcohol, right? And that is just a normal thing for them, and that almost 3/4 of the youths, the male youths, had experience over the last couple months before this. Some point in time they were drunk. Not just drinking a light beer or something, no, but carried itself to that point. So we're talking about, look at the kind of percentage and thing that Trinidad has. So that we are in David Masjid, and I know we have people who are actually not from Trinidad who only Zoom and thing, and we're making you aware exactly where we are, right? And this is the season of festivities in Trinidad, right? So you can imagine what kind of spikes it's going to have here, right? Now, one of the things here that let me just kind of substantiate here is the fact that when we look at when we look at the fact that what kind of population we have, as we were saying earlier, that generally the population is more than half of them are Christians, right? And there are multiple places. I'll just use one part, right? In Ecclesiastes 9:7, it says, "Go then, eat your bread in happiness, and drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works." And in many parts of the Bible, I've just quoted one here, there is nowhere that it says that alcohol is forbidden, right? What it will say is don't indulge so much until you're gone, until you just use the normal word here, drunk, right? But it is allowed in multiple places. I just quoted one, right, where this is given. So if you think about the majority of our population being Christians, then you could see why our numbers are like that as well, right? Because of course, if the majority were Muslims, then our numbers would not be like that. But that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us in. So we are accustomed to this. So inshallah, let's go on. So let's connect this now to Islam and what did Islam says. So there's this hadith that lots of us have heard already, right? And it goes like this, where the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever can guarantee the chastity of what is between his two jawbones. And when we say chastity, it means we protect it. And when we're talking about jawbones, we basically mean our mouth. So it means that in this hadith, the Prophet is talking about whether or not you can protect what happens with your mouth. And mouth goes two directions, right? What coming out in terms of the words you speak and how you behave and that kind of thing, and what going in. So today, because of the information we got with terms of the primary schools and these adults and things, we're really looking at what we put into our mouths, right? So you can see my boy here with the knife and fork and thing, right? And that is what we're looking at. So we're trying to see how we could protect our Jannah from what we're putting into our mouths. And that is really our view. And the hadith goes on, I'll finish the hadith, and what is between his two legs, I guarantee him paradise. Right? And this is Bukhari, this is authentic hadith. So it could be split up into many different things, right? But today we're just looking at specifically protecting our mouths and especially what we put into it, right? And that, whether or not, will give us, adjust our scale and bring us closer to or further away from Allah, right? So let's look at when we talk about the big thing, right? When we are accustomed to talking about Islam and Sirah and that kind of thing, you can see this here, how them boys behaving there, how them boys taking a little drink and that kind of thing, right? In that period of time, right, just before the Nabi came out and started to get revelation thing, that was what we call the dark periods, as you can see there, right? And that was where people were very ignorant and they were misbehaving and stuff, right? So we would call that the period of Jahiliyyah, right? But if you think about that, in terms of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Quran now and gave guidance, this took a long time, right? As you can see there, and it took 23 years for Quran to be developed, right? Until we ended up into the point where we came into the light, right? So we move from one point to the other. Now the word we want to use there what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did is that he used the word tadarruj, right? And that means gradually. So gradually he moved from one end, right? Where we send the message in Nabi and people move from there of darkness, right? And eventually moved across into a position where they're in light, enlightenment. So this gradual movement or tajarrud, that is where we are. So let's go take a look at it. So in the first case, we're talking about, specifically we're talking about alcohol, right? So Umar ibn al-Khattab, at that point in time, he came and spoke to the Prophet ﷺ, right? And he asked about alcohol, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replied in this ayah in Surah Baqarah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yassalunaka anil khamri wal maisir. Right? And specifically here, the word we're looking at, right? Yassalunaka is saying that they ask you about Khamr wal maisir, right? Which is gambling. But the word we want to specify here is this word here, Khamr. Right? Now, Khamr, as you can see from the little picture there, that is what locally we are accustomed calling that a hijab, right? But the Arabic terminology is really a kimar. So a kimar is a head covering, right? So the word Khamr has the same root. So when you talk about Khamr, it talks about what covers our mind, what is covering our intellect, right? So when it goes here and we look at it, Allah says they ask you about what covers your mind and gambling, right? So the Arabic phrase for that is Khamr, right? Or if we translate it as really intoxicants. Now lots of Qurans translate it into wine. Yes, it is wine, but there are other things to go with it too, right? So wine is one of the intoxicants because as time goes by, you recognize more and more intoxicants, right? You see the fella buying gas and sniffing that, right? That falls on a Khamr then, right? Because it covers his mind and he's no longer be able to think like how he should, right? So we go on there. Kul fihima ithmun kabirun wa manafi'ul nas, right? And say to them that in them is a great sin and yet some benefit for people. So Allah is explaining, that you can take intoxicant. Don't quote it as wine. You can take any intoxicant and there is great sin in it, but there's some benefit. And let me look at a little benefit, right? One of the things, people get high. And that's the point to taking intoxicants. And they feel nice and that kind of thing. Think about whether or not it is whatever they're using to get high, right? That falls under intoxicants, right? Right. So that's one of their benefits for them, for people. Look at it. There's great sin, right? Yet there's some benefits. So this is one of the benefits. And another of the benefits is making money. Go think of the barman. Think of the man there. You ever see a poor barman? Right? They always make a lot of money. Check Trinidad and Tobago, check Carib, check Stag, check Angostura, what you kind of, right? The shares and what they own and stuff, because they're making a lot of money. So there's profit in it. Allah is saying there's profit in it. There's benefit for people, but it's a greater sin. And it goes on in the rest of the ayah.